Welcome to Better Relationships, Better Life, where relationships expert Judy K. Herman and her guests share insights that can help you move through conflicts in your 9-to-5 jobs and your 24/7 lives. Crack the clarity code and create deeper connections beyond the messiness of relationships. Here's your host, Judy K. Herman.
As we tune into this episode called Breaking Free from Secrecy and Shame, keep in mind, we are talking about sensitive topics. This is not only for couples, but it is for professionals, colleagues, and clergy to get an insider look at issues we address. As a psychotherapist, speaker, and executive coach, I also support organizations and leaders. If you want to know more about how I can help your company with communication and relationships, just go to judyspeaker.com. Please take heed since we are talking about sensitive topics. In the meantime, I'd like to introduce you to a courageous couple willing to share how deeper issues have affected their marriage, relationships, and career in part 1 of this 2-part series entitled Pornography, Addiction, and Marriage. Kirsten D Samuel, professional writer, was at a loss for words when her husband, Dave Samuel, audio production specialist, confessed his addiction to pornography. The months ahead revealed the bottom was deeper still as she was diagnosed with clinical depression and PTSD. After 14 years, Kirsten now serves wives wounded by pornography. She lives each day with her recovered husband as they choose authenticity, love, faith, fun, and forgiveness. Kirsten and Dave openly speak about the millions addicted to porn and God's redeeming grace. Dave and Kirsten have been married 40 years with 3 grown children and 12 grandchildren. Let's tune in. We're going to be talking about, Kirsten, your book and your journey, both of your journeys, actually, a very courageous one. And your book is called Choosing a Way Out, and it's Author Academy top 10 finalists.
It is.
Congratulations. That's
Thank you.
Awesome. But you're an author and a woman that I really resonate with. I feel like you're really a soul sister because a lot of what I wrote in my book, Beyond Messy Relationships, has taken a tremendous amount of courage to write. And I know that it's taken a lot of courage for you to live. So why don't you share with folks your story?
Sure. I'll go ahead and start. I was sitting at my desk at work one day, and my boss came up to me and said, "Hey, can you come on down? We've got a meeting in HR. Can you come on down with me?" And I was like, "Well, sure. What's that about?" And I got down there. They basically had information, and they said, "Here's what we have culled from your computer usage, and there's some things on here we're very concerned about, and we'd like you to look at them and tell us, if this is wrong or right." And I didn't even have to look at it. It was like, it was stuff that was just not appropriate for work. And below that, I knew, okay, I have struggled with pornography for years since I was exposed as a 5-year-old by a friend. And so I've struggled with it all my life. Now, it wasn't as big of an issue before the internet, but once the internet came along, then it came full bore. And the whole process of trying to myself deal with it and then doing well and then relapsing and then falling into the shame cycle and then I'm never going to do this again and working hard and doing pretty well and then falling again, that cycle over and over again. So I knew in my spirit, I said, okay, obviously this is not working. I'm not taking care of this myself. And so I just said, I have struggled with this for years and this is what I'm dealing with.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let me hold this for a moment because that moment for you, I can't share with us what you actually felt when, I mean, this is because this is not just like getting caught at home. This is getting caught at work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it was devastating for me. And I guess my thought process at the time was, I've tried to take care of this myself. I have not been able to do that. I need some help. I need to own this. And I need to not try to dodge my way out of it, but just to say, this is right. Yes, this is what has happened. And so the consequences for that were, of course, you got caught. So, our immediate job is to fire you. And they said, but, we want you to go and think about this and come up with a plan of what you're going to do. And we'll revisit this tomorrow. And if your plan meets the agreed upon, whatever it was, they really didn't give me a criteria. Otherwise, I probably would have checked the boxes off and done that. So I had to come up with a plan and present it to them. And then they would decide whether I would keep my job and move forward with that, or if I would not be an employee there anymore.
Wow. Well, let me hold this, Dave, because, you got multiple layers going on is what I'm thinking. Like, okay, I'm assuming, well, I know from reading your book, Kirsten, you didn't have a clue about this.
No.
And then Dave, you're facing, like, you're about to lose your job and you got to come up with a plan. Like, how did you even process this? What was the most dreaded thing that you had to face? That was it Kirsten? Was it the job? Like, what was really going on with you in those moments?
Yeah, I think both. The big question was, how am I going to tell Kirsten what's going on? Because, as a provider for the family, I needed to, take care of that. And yet at the same time, now I've jeopardized all of that, the security, everything that had gone into that. So it was, how do I tell Kirsten about this in a way that shows the fact that I'm very torn up about this, and I know that she is going to be. And then the second in the back of my mind was, what am I going to do for a profession? And so there was multiple things, but the drive home was pretty long.
I can only imagine. So Kirsten, tell us your story or your side of what you experienced that day. Well, that was a fateful day for you.
It was. It was a day that, I didn't see coming at all. And when he got home, I noticed he wasn't himself. Normally he comes in and he's, we're connected very well and stuff like this. He was really quiet. And when he told me after dinner, my knees just buckled. I just collapsed. And I thought, what in the world? Who is this man? And, Judy, you can imagine, I went through the whole spectrum of emotions in a nanosecond. And what I ended up with was disbelief and anger. And, I believe that immediately I knew that I had no idea how to deal with this. I didn't know if I wanted to deal with it. And so I knew we needed help. And absolutely. I was so thankful that immediately a name popped into my mind, and was a coworker of mine. And she and her husband are both trained counselors. And I knew I could trust her with this story, because the other part that hit me, and I know it hit Dave, was just this utter shame. I felt immediately like I was a failure, that I was not enough, that all of the things that I had carried and hidden myself through the years just came right to the forefront. See, you don't matter. You're not enough. You can't please your husband. He's got to go look elsewhere. Just everything was bombarding me. And I felt like my brain was in hyper warp speed. And it was also as sluggish as, ice moving down a river. I mean, it was just, it was that weird combo.
Well, that truly is. So that's trauma there. Emotional trauma, and like getting hit by a tornado or something. You've got this fear, this intense fear and helplessness and horror, and your whole world is falling apart. What you thought was secure. and just then this deep betrayal, like you're trying to process this.
Yes.
That's what happens. I mean,
Mhm.
physiologically, we feel this.
Yeah.
Yeah, we feel
Right.
it, don't we? In
We do.
every cell of our bodies.
Yeah. It was amazing to, as I looked back on it, to process not only the emotional, the mental, but the physical, the physical response and how, in a matter of, a few sentences, I went from, this secure, loving relationship to who is this man?
Wow. So Dave, were you even able, because you're going through your own trauma as well, like, were you even able to tune into how she would respond?
Yeah, I mean, when she said, we need help, we need to call these folks, I was like, yeah, let's do it. Because, as a guy, it's like, okay, let's fix this. Let's bang out the stuff we need to do and get it done, and, shoot it, bag it, and go home kind of thing.
Oh, you know what? That is so common, for sure. Okay, let me get my job back. Let's do the plan. Let's put everything in place. Let's get on with our lives here.
It wasn't until, and this is fast forwarding just a little bit, but it wasn't until I met with a counselor, and his question to me was, what are you willing to pay? And I don't think that was
What are you willing to do?
Yeah. What are you willing to do to heal your wife, to allow your wife to heal? And it wasn't until that question that really it sunk into me that, I had really hurt Kirsten to the core. I mean, a lot of times in the pornography with men, we're very compartmentalized. We're saying, okay, this is just my thing. It doesn't have anything to do with my wife. And and we rationalize it that way, but when the reality is that we hurt our spouses tremendously by what we've done.
Well, and not only that, Dave, when I counsel with men and with couples in this area, they didn't just hurt their wives, but they betrayed the trust. They really hurt their own souls too. And I'm sure you've done your research and healing around how it affects your brain, how it disconnects you from who you really are. And it really takes you out of your life, just as any other addiction does. But there is a whole lot of shame around the pornography part of it.
Yes.
And there's, I mean, you all probably know this, but it affects more than people just like getting fired from their jobs. I mean, it can go to a point of, molestation or prostitution, and it can go on this very evil pathway. And people, like it is dangerous. People,
it is dangerous.
It's a very progressive drug. Yes.
It's very progressive. And where Dave was working at the time, 2 of our adult children were working there. And so if he had been immediately dismissed and escorted out of the building, they would have observed this. And my thought was, in those initial things is you got to tell the kids, because if you go in tomorrow and they escort you out, my kids, Mama Bear's coming up here. My kids are not going to be shocked by this. They're going to have a heads up, so they're prepared emotionally to deal with what might happen and the questions that they might receive. So, we immediately started to see the impact of this on our family.
Yeah. And that, honestly, that's what I wanted. I really wanted to go in that direction. When I was listening to one of your other interviews, my heart hurt really for both of you, because, and if you read in the book further, Kirsten, you had gone through some depression and some unfinished business also in your childhood that you had no idea. And honestly, I think these 2, I see you, Dave, even in your exposure as a little 5-year-old. I mean, golly, we know what it's like to have our little 5-year-old little boys. And oh my gosh, that there is the effects of child abuse in our society. It's a systemic society problem.
Mhm.
And, your innocence was taken away
Mhm.
early. And then Kirsten, I don't know if you want to talk about how your innocence was taken away at a very young age. And
Yeah.
I actually do. I kind of want to frame a little bit of this too,
Sure.
for folks that are listening, because as we talk about some very deep things and unfinished business, I kind of want to prepare listeners ahead of time that if you feel like that punch in your stomach, take some deep breaths. That's okay.
Mhm.
But also would like for you to get some help too. So make
Mhm.
sure you've got, some support. But so Kirsten, share with us part of your journey as you like the light is kind of like what happened with Dave. That was actually, in my opinion, a divine invitation, even
Mhm.
though it was traumatic,
Mhm.
but it brought to the surface some other areas that really needed healing.
Yeah, it's really crazy, but I realized that divine intervention in exposing what Dave was dealing with was actually a divine intervention for me, because it was my invitation to finally deal with what I had been hiding for many, many years, what I had suppressed. And that was and I believe I was about 9 years old when I've kind of gone back to the timeline. I was about 9 years old and I was physically attacked. And by somebody I knew. And and I've done some healing work on that, specifically with a counselor and another group where I went in and really had some prayer done with me and for me, where I was able to bring this all out. And I had been suppressing that. And as a result of suppressing that, there were behaviors, there were attitudes in my life. There was difficulty in our relationship because I hadn't processed through that. And not only did that happen once, it happened again when I was in college. And and while that time I actually did try to get some help, I still brushed it off. I still strong-armed it. And, interestingly enough, the first person I actually ever told about the first instance was Dave. And when I told him about it, I said, but it's okay, I'm fine. And I wasn't fine.
Yeah. I would imagine, like, because that's what happens if there's sexual violation through pornography or molestation, attacks, rape, anything like that. It gets absorbed, doesn't it? And it affects your developing brain, especially as like my heart just went out to you too, Kirsten, as a 9-year-old little girl. Like you did not invite any of that. That was like you two were violated. So anyway, that's what really brought some tears to my eyes as I was hearing your story.
Yeah.
Because really both of these incidences here, in my opinion, they were a violation of your childhood innocence.
They
right?
were. They were.
And
Yes.
so how to grow and grow up, right? So that's what we're supposed to do, right? Because if we go into our adult lives trying to do, have an adult relationship, but we have all this unfinished business and we're still like, we still don't have that self-compassion and that healing, which is absolutely necessary to get beyond and have, connection in your marriage.
Yeah. In the book, I relate that growing up is hard enough the first time, but when you have to do it, you have to do the emotional growth from, in my case, a 9-year-old, from Dave's case, a 5-year-old, and you have to do that in a compressed amount of time. That is excruciating. It is so painful, and yet it's also grace, because we look back, Judy, on the first 25 years of our marriage. And yes, this happened at 25 years of our marriage.
That's what I really wanted to clarify too. This is not when y'all have been married for 5 years or
No.
your kids are little, but you've had your whole like, more than 2 decades of knowing each other and raising kids.
Yeah. And so as a mom and I was dealing with what I was dealing with, and Dave and I were trying to figure this out. And were we going to survive? Was this marriage going to survive? Because honestly, I was the one on the way out the door. But then it was discovering that not only was I suicidally depressed, but I had probably raised my children as a suicidally depressed mother.
Oh, wow.
And then that realization of going back to each one of my children and talking to them and apologizing. I had this intense need to say, would you please forgive me? And again, to receive the grace from our kids of, Mom, we didn't know that that's what was going on. You were present with us, and we felt like you loved us, and it wasn't that. But the freedom that we have today in our interactions with our kids and with our family is so much. It's not even the same relationship as it was the first 25 years.
And the way that I process some of this and also some of your story, Kirsten and Dave, was that you all going through what you did as kids was likely passed down to you a generational system and issues that haven't been dealt with. And so I think it's so beautiful that you went to your grown children and given them permission, to, being authentic and real with them. My goodness, what a gift you gave them. Because this undercurrent stuff that goes on, people don't really realize. And if you're raising little kids, the more that you get your story and the more healing that you do in your own journey and your own healing, it makes a difference on your parenting for sure. Because kids do sense it, and I have questions. All right, let me kind of, I just want to encourage folks. Some people live with these secrets and they take them to their grave. And then they are passed down to the next generation. And then there's all this shame. Where'd this come from? It must, but it's not just you. It's like, it is a system of influence. So I think it's beautiful how you two are demonstrating how to change your family tree.
Yeah. That was one of the things that one of our, we worked with what was called a restoration team. And one of the things they encouraged us was to show our children what it means to fail big time, and then to come back. Wow. That we had an opportunity, because one of my big question was, as the mom, I wanted to protect my kids from this ugliness that was happening within us. And we were really encouraged to be as transparent as we could be, to answer the questions that they had, and allow them into the healing process. And that was amazingly encouraging. Wow. To invite our children, who our youngest at the time was 18. So these were adult children. Wow. And, so I want your audience to understand we were dealing with all adults at this point, but to invite them in and to let them share memories that they had, maybe where we had caused some pain, and it was because of what was unresolved in us. And then to ask for forgiveness and to work through that with them. And then let them see us work through it. And, in the book, one of our sons, his big thing was, Mom, do you love my dad?
Oh, and that was a tender moment. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Tender.
I still tear up when I relate that part of the story, because he completely broke when he said that. But it was such a pivotal question to me, coming from my son, and to say, love is a choice. It's an act of the will. It is not an emotion. And we have it so mixed up. And right now I'm choosing to stay with your dad. I'm choosing to believe we can come back from this. I don't know how, but I'm making that choice, because honestly, at that point, I didn't like him. I didn't want to be with him. And I was still dealing. And this was in the middle of me finally going to get this diagnosis of the suicidal depression.
Wow.
And so I was still in this complete denial mode of, you haven't dealt with this stuff in your life yet either. And so to have that question and to be really put on the spot and and realize that something is bigger here.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so touching. I'm so touched by the courage and transparency we just heard with Kirsten and Dave. My biggest takeaway is there's a story that's bigger than our pain and what we're going through. If hearing this has touched a tender place in your heart, you're not alone. There's hope, and you're worth it. Do get in touch by going to betterrelationshipsbetterlife.com. Next week, you'll hear part 2 of our Breaking Free from Secrecy and Shame series entitled Healing for Children and Faith Communities. Until then, feel free to share, subscribe, rate, and comment. See you next time for Better Relationships, Better Life.